All right, folks, welcome to the Unchurch University Podcast. I've got a guest that I'm super excited about. I hope I pronounce her name. Is it Noack? Is that
Yep.
correct?
Yeah,
All
that's
right,
correct.
beautiful. And just brief background, as we were talking before I started recording here, I had an experience many, many years ago that I just kind of left in the background and hasn't really shared with anybody, but I heard Stephen talking on another podcast, and just what he was saying was really resonating with me, but on a little bit different level. So I thought it'd be interesting to have him on and share some of these experiences and see if we can make some sense of it, especially as we talk about energy work. So thank you, sir, for taking some time to be on the show.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Um,
So, yeah,
yeah.
go ahead. How do you want me to lead off with my near-death experience?
Well, I want to try to give you a little flex here. I've seen so many interviews with you, and I'm sure you're so bored with the consistent format. I thought I'd give a brief introduction, let you run with it. I usually let folks do the introduction, but I thought I'd give you a break, and I would try to introduce you because, again, I think what you do is unique. So how we classify that, but based on the information I've garnered. You've had two significant near-death experiences that really influenced your work and your life, obviously. The first major incident occurred when you were 4 years old, and then you had another near-death experience as an adult. And during these experiences, you encountered extremely profound insights, such as the revelation of the quantum field and its connection to humanity's healing within their divine blueprint. My understanding is now you're working as a healer, guiding others on their journey to freedom from pain and trauma, utilizing these concepts like biophotons, collective consciousness, and the power of the subconscious mind. How's that for an introduction?
Hey, that's pretty good. You're gonna have to send me that.
Well, it's beautiful. I just remember the last podcast I heard. It was a couple years ago. So my guess is you're 49 now in that range. And at that stage, you're working with elderly patients as it relates to dementia. Are you still doing that?
No, actually, I'm doing the healing pretty much full time. I did keep one person for like 3 hours a week just because I love doing it. Um, I'm really the reluctant healer. I'm like, you know, here it is. My consciousness got rearranged, and it was like, okay, I think now that these beings returned, I think I need to do this. I think I need to listen because I tried to push it away, and yeah, it just grew and grew until I had so many clients that I had to let go of some of that, and I realized that I did my part there. I had to become present for these people and hold that love and hold that care when no one else was around. That's where I witnessed my character, regardless of what the world was telling me, opinions of others, judgments on me. That was where I got to witness my true character. And I realized, okay, in this job, I was not just say I'm cleaning a person. I'm not just cleaning a person. I was cleaning the butt of God. That behind every single person was my creator. And that would indicate through the compass of my heart, based on how I felt about my actions, my relationship with my creator. So it started to really help me reveal that inner outer.
Well, again, one of the reasons that you were appealing to me, I listen to a lot of podcasts, I see a lot of shows, and just your humility and just look at you in a good way, right? You didn't put on some special outfit. There's no costume here. And that was one of the things that I started understanding once I had my experience. It was noticing that we are actors, we are characters, as you mentioned. We're the joystick behind this character, and we create all that. So what I see in the space of healers and facilitators and a lot of my community is this desire to be seen as something special, right? To elevate my status by the way I look, by the way my social media is set up, so people will see me as something special. And I think we're all special, right? It's just helping folks understand that their level of specialness versus elevating ourselves to a higher level. It's like, how do we bring everybody into the fold? And I heard you once talking about creating heaven or hell in this reality, really how you view this reality. And it starts with understanding the nervous system, I think is what your quote was.
Yeah.
So many things are telling us in the world who we are, and we're selling ourselves out for approval.
I would say definitely through our creations and the contraction or expansion or narrowed downness of our nervous system. That becomes your cage. You know what I mean? But it's an equation. It's an equation we can figure out. And yeah, to the point of special, I prefer not to be special. I prefer everybody because I believe that was part of my healing, was to tell people what I experienced, because I was going to be in chaos until I let this energy out of me. Once these beings returned and I started telling my story and sharing it, that was the healing. And it was to tell everybody, hey, this is available to every single person. I just happened to see something and learned how to work with it.
Yes, no, that's perfect. Well, and again, I don't want to take up too much time with you having to continue to share your story, but I think for folks that are just tuning in, maybe just the brief background on your experiences, and we can get into really what those translated into and how you're using those to help heal people.
Sure. Yeah. Well, my experience started at 4. I was completely run over by a car. I woke up with what I thought was a person, and I'm leaning on someone, and I opened my eyes and I noticed they have long silver hair. I can see the bottom of a robe that was almost the same color. And when I turned, still thinking, who is this? That's my first thought. There was a being that had no face, a hooded being that had no face, only light where its face should be. And then that's when I asked what happened. They said, Steven, you were in an accident. Put your head down. Everything's going to be fine. And I put my head on this being's chest, and that's when I was staring into its face, still having some normal thoughts like what's happening, but just kind of starting to be pulled into the being's face. And I can feel the magnetic pull, and it's into, I guess you could say, a tunnel, but it wasn't really a tunnel. It's more like this being's face. And I remember thinking, this is so bright, but I don't have to squint. And those were some just like background thoughts. It was brighter than the sun, but I had no need to adjust my eyes. So in this face eventually materializes a scene where I see meadows and flowers and all this stuff. And I noticed how vibrant it is, how real it is, and that the colors were their own beings, and that how everything was working together in kind of like a harmony, if you will. So I'm looking around, seeing meadows and flowers and all these colors that I've never seen before. And I notice in the distance there's people, like figures, and they're laughing and they're playing, and I can tell it's elderly, it's some kids, and I see the laughter, actually see it going through the air, and that's when it touches my heart. And I instantly got the knowing that everything was one, that everything came from this place that was pure love, and that hate or suffering or pain could not exist there, couldn't even vibrate high enough to materialize. And I wanted to go there. I knew everything came from it. Everything would go back to it. I wanted to go there, and they said, it's not your time. And that's when it was almost like somebody just moved the screen to the side and the scene changed. And I'm in another area that almost looks like space, but it's got lines kind of going up and down. It looks like graph paper or like a blueprint. And that's when the being says, this is the quantum field. You create your reality through your thoughts and then your emotions that get cast to this field, and they circuit back through you. And this grants you a material experience on an emotional and spiritual level. So then they showed myself in like the center of a wheel, almost like a wagon wheel. And now I'm like observing, I'm realizing, okay, that's me in the center. They're like, you were pure love when you came into this body, and then you spent your energy to have an experience. You spent that love, but it was about the placements and where the energy still exists in the quantum field. And they showed me a screen, like almost like the outer rim of the wheel. And I had all these cords going out to the screen, and the screen had like little boxes, almost like little TV screens, and they were memories. And I could tell, I couldn't really see what was happening, but I could tell they were memories. And the being explained to me, these are basically deposits of energy. But you can work to basically restore yourself back to your divine image. And then that's when they mentioned the divine blueprint, and they showed me something, seemed like it was off in the distance, but it almost looked like a credit card that was like missing one corner and had circuits on it. And they said, this is your divine blueprint. This is for restoration. This is your original template, your original circuiting. If you attach your thought or your identity and belief that you are this, then you're coming back online. You're restoring your circuits, your wiring. Whereas, in these memories and some of these experiences, my wiring would be screwed up. Now, they're also showing me things for the future, for what I would experience and encounter later and unpack. Because at 4, I couldn't remember all that, obviously. I knew something happened, but it wasn't until like 10 or 11 that I started to remember sitting with this being and speaking. I tried to tell a couple people, and I realized that wasn't any good real quick. So I kept it to myself, a lot of what I experienced, until they came back. I was having a surgery. Well, I did have the second accident, and I had the surgery shortly after on the elbow that broke the window when I flipped the car over 5 times. As I'm having the surgery, the being speaks to me again. I'm getting anxious. I don't want to be there. I'm getting ready to leave. I hadn't had any medicine yet. So I'm literally probably a millisecond from sitting up and saying, I don't want to do this. I'll deal with, whatever happened in the elbow, the pain or whatever. And just then this energy starts from my toes and goes all the way up and around my head, almost like a casket. I don't know, like an Egyptian, like you're encased in this pure love. And it filled like every part of me. And I was just like, yeah, everything's going to be all right. Yeah. And I sat back down, and the energy spoke to me. It said, Stephen, just put your head down. Everything's going to be all right. And that's when, forget it, material reality for me just broke. And I was like, holy crap, that actually happened. That was real. And then started all the supernatural experiences, the lights in my room, getting lifted up out of my chair and spoken to by these beings who were explaining we were like a biological machine. We have a quantum generator in our chest, our heart. We have like a Tesla coil going from our third eye down, and it's a frequency oscillator. And whatever I feed it, it's going to spit out the character for me to embody and play on this planet. And it was about the data that I was feeding my system and the inputs and outputs. So I needed a lot of correcting and tuning, if you will. They explained that we were all prisms of light, all prisms for the creator, but it's a matter of tuning myself back in to basically discharge these distortions, no longer give them the resonance they need. During this time, I woke up to these energies standing all around me, moving around. They were like silhouettes. Some were smoky, some were light. I thought I was nuts. At this time, I'm a regular retail store manager. I hadn't even started senior care, but I did have to leave that job because I couldn't be around the public anymore with everything that was going on. So at first I thought I was haunted. And like all of a sudden I'm seeing things pass by me, and then it's gaining more material, more form. So I realized they're silhouettes. I'm like, these are like figures. So I don't pay too much attention. Then they start communicating, and I'm starting to feel pressure here, starting to not be able to control it, literally spasms on the side of my head. So I'm researching information. That's the spiritual side of the brain. So it got to the point where a lot of the conversation wasn't good. It was, you're a POS. You're not going to be any good in your life. You're not going to do anything. Very little bit of maybe 5% of good speak in there. And then I realized by some of the things that were being said that these were images of me that I had created that were now reverbing kind of like back to me. And I was actually being given a gift to see these transmissions that were happening through me rather than to me. So I stopped looking outside, and I'm like, I need to tune my thoughts and my emotions so they work together rather than against each other. Now, this was something else they were teaching me, was about the alternating current of duality. How we see a lot of people very logic-minded, little emotion, very emotional, little logic, that this is the circuit of duality, and this is the reason why we're pushed and pulled by the environment. and they were showing me how to create a direct current, combine my thought and breath, combine Heavenly Father and Divine Mother, as they showed me, in a triangle during my NDE as the Trinity, to create a singularity or a sun within myself, a basically Christed center, you could say. So a lot of the supernatural stuff, I was on my own. I didn't have anybody to turn to but Creator. And that's really what started to foster that as I was guided through it, where I'm in it, for a month, didn't sleep for a week and a half, things like that. And it forces you in a way to go to that higher power, because I needed something bigger than myself. I had to reattach my thought to this divine blueprint and realize that I was all of creation, that this was not outside my ability. In other words, like overcoming the addiction after the car accidents to pain medication, all that was through rewiring my mind and my heart to create a direct current so that I could break that circuit of duality and control how I felt when I using my thoughts. And that was kind of like the goal. I wanted to get to that space of sovereignty. I was tired of myself, really. And I realized my fight wasn't with the long line at the grocery store. It wasn't with the line of traffic. It was with the energy that would come up when I was in those situations. So I directed everything there.
Yeah. Love that. Fascinating. Again, my experience, and again, the difference between the experiences, and we'll talk about the beings, but I relate wholly to that experience from being in the Matrix and then being an embodied form of unconditional love. Right. So you see a lot of talking about unconditional love online, and I'm like, I don't know if that's it. Like,
I can kind of feel that. Yeah, I can feel in your words how much love and light you're sending me. So I always have the habit when somebody says love and light, I'm like, what kind of love and light? I want to ask them that question.
Yeah, because there's levels to it, right? Like, I'm like, oh, unconditional love, we just say that. But the embodied experience of that is something that I can't articulate.
Let me make sure I put focus on. Okay. Yep.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, you're good. It's something that I can't articulate, but it's an embodied experience that if you've had, it's unforgettable. There's no way around it. And how it adjusts you is you said, it made me, same thing as I was dancing in back and forth between it. I could see all the thoughts of what I wanted to say, all my ego, like, oh, say something important here so they'll think you're important. But I was just observing it, right? It wasn't me. I'm like, oh,
right. When you're
Kirby does.
And when you're embodied, you have that ability to reflect. When you're not embodied, when you're not setting your parameters, in other words, claiming your identity as a sovereign being and giving away that energy for the world to identify you, it's going to be very hard to have enough of that energy to see, to discern. And I didn't talk about the I am experience, which was pretty weird. I'm driving home one day, I'm beating myself up, talking poorly to myself like I did. I was a martyr, and I figured I had to suffer. For some reason, this was just like ingrained in me.
I relate.
Yeah. So I'm driving home, and as I'm doing this voice comes in, and it's off to my right. And at this time, I'm still dealing with those projections. So I'm thinking I'm haunted. I'm trying to shut everything down. In other words, I'm like, I'm not listening to you, but I notice the voice is clear. It's not dropping off. It's not hesitating. And it starts telling me how loved I am, all the people that love me, all the people I've helped. And I'm just like, wow, and I'm feeling the difference in the communication with that. And I'm like, who are you? And then I hear the words, I am. And I was never religious, never went to church. So me being me, I'm like, I am who? And again, I am. And I'm like, yeah, I got that. I am who? Because I had never heard this expression. And then the third one, I am. All of a sudden, all these visions, and it was like I was seeing and feeling every single memory I've ever had separately but simultaneously. And I still can't explain it. It was at the same time, but they were separate. And right then, like a reflex, I just started crying. I didn't think about anything. It just started crying. I had to pull the car over. That was the hardest I've ever cried. And then that was the burning glove compartment moment, I call it, as opposed to the burning bush. But these supernatural experiences of sitting out in your yard and all of a sudden I'm being lifted out of my body. And I realized during this time, my physical pain goes away. Any emotional worry goes away. Now, as they're speaking certain instructions to me and about ascension and humanity's evolution and purification, I'm realizing, wait a minute, I did that while I was alive. I just made it back to that space where I had no pain, where I had no worry. No, I said, I can do this now. And then I
Yes.
started to pursue that space.
Yes. Well, I think that's the beauty of the work, and we'll get into some of the work that you do, and some other folks. It's, to me, we were talking earlier about this desire for people in the space to be special or seen as a guru or magical. And I think anything that's leading people away from their ability to heal themselves concerns me, right?
Yeah.
It's how do we help people find their own ability to heal themselves? And that's what you were shown, and that's the gift. And I think that's important. So many folks are trying so desperately to look at my magic. It's like, it's easy. We all have this ability. And so that makes me question if you really do have that ability, if you feel you need to, really have the show. But
Yeah,
your
because
point is,
the testimonials really aren't about us. This is about creator.
yes. And you mentioned a piece again about this self-talk, and it's like almost everybody I work with. Well, just again, what I'm loving about this conversation, there's not a lot what I call woo in it. There's a lot of science behind all of this, right? And so we know that people are averaging about, like, let's say 10,000 thoughts a day. We know about 80 to 90% of those are negative thoughts. We also know that the same thoughts you have today are the same thoughts that you had yesterday, which are the same thoughts that you had the day before, because most people are just playing out a program,
And I'll
right?
give you some more science behind it. What we're looking to do between the positive and negative poles in our body by bringing them together is to cause what's known as an action potential, where we're pushing the nervous system to about 7 hertz, where it's normally at about 5. Now we're opening ion channels and discharging lower cellular memory, where a lot of our disease is stored.
Well, let's talk about that. You mentioned and I'll finish and ask you the question. But the point is, a lot of folks don't realize for the first 6 to 7 years of their life, their brain's in theta wave, which is just a hypnosis, right? So everything. I got a 6.5-year-old daughter. So for the last 5 years, 6 years, I'm thinking, what are we doing to her here, right? Like this is an important stage. We're programming her, and then she'll become more conscious, and then she's running out that program. And then she's like the
Yeah,
rest of the people in the Matrix that are trying so desperately to convince you of the character that they are, right? That they built. Let me tell you about who I am. It's like, yeah, that's not you. You're in there, but that's the
right.
character that you're playing. It's a cool character. Thank you. But you're more than that. So people don't realize that they have a little bit less free will than they think until they become more conscious and are able to see this programming. And once you see the programming, to your point, you'll have those observational thoughts of,
Right.
oh, you
And
almost did
and
that? Why would you do that? Well, you wanted to appear this way to this person. That's how you do things. Oh, well, I don't want to do that anymore. Disruption in the pattern, disruption in the program. Now
yep.
you're moving in a completely different direction. And
That's
then
why you want to have a routine of that set programming where you're speaking into your system. And I want to make sure I do this to set my parameters and have those markers so I know when something comes in, this is an opposite frequency. By programming myself, I am a sovereign being. And then you get into gnosis and you get into the strength of the program. But you want a programming routine, because if you're speaking this information into yourself, then it's going to be revealed when the opposite information tries to deposit.
so
Oh,
powerful.
I think you froze. There you are.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, that's so powerful, and it's something I'll admit on this podcast. Yeah, that was my journey. I had those experiences, and there was a part of me that figured you figured it out, right? I'm like, you figured it out. And what I kind of related to is like the person that maybe is suffering with some sort of mental health or physical issue, and they're taking a medication, and they're like, I'm fine, right? So they stop taking their medication. So the frequency and vibration I was operating on one level after I stopped programming myself because I didn't think I needed to. Slowly but surely, the matrix started pulling itself back in. And I felt like at one moment, I felt a disconnect between that conscious self, that awareness, and my program self, if that makes sense. And I would catch myself, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, you were just, there you were, there was Kirby, the programmed version of yourself. How did you slip into that?
And it's
Because
a lot harder to get back to that state when you're not doing it for a while. It's much
yes,
easier. Like for me, if I do it daily, I consider this plugging in my EV vehicle.
yes, love
I'm
it.
plugging in my device to do data maintenance so that I can return to that center and that
Yes,
basically ground myself fully in a 0 point maximum ground state. I want to be able to get back there, but if I'm not doing programming, skip that for a few days, I'm going to need to push that signal all the way down now through what I created.
yes, yes, thank you. So I relate to that, and again, can self-admittedly saw myself go through that pattern on occasion and realize, no, this, you have to constantly program, you have to constantly be dialed in here, because the moment you're not, you're moving unconsciously, you're just
Mm-hmm.
reacting. Super fascinating. But you mentioned something about discharged energy. And again, in one of the ceremonies that we hold, there's a part of the ceremony where the client, their default mode network is completely shut down, and they're unaware of how they're acting in the space. And this is under a psychedelic. They're completely unaware of how they're acting in the space. But what it seems to be happening, and what I would classify it as, is they're having this full somatic release.
Mm-hmm.
So like most humans, again, like we know, if we look online, look at a gazelle that was chased by a lion, once it gets away, it will start vibrating all that extra adrenaline out, trying to move itself back to homeostasis, right? That settled space. We as humans, somebody cuts us off in traffic, we give them the bird and just shove that down. Nobody's vibrating that out of them. So it's just, I feel like they're packed. So when they come into the space and they start having that somatic release, it, to me, that is like the highest energetic experience a person could have outside of maybe something that's manufactured.
Mm-hmm.
But what it feels like to me is they are discharging that energy. I know that's what's happening. It's a complete discharge of all of this stored up energy and trauma, because I think everything is energy. I think everything is stored. I'd be curious what your thoughts are on that. And then what are some techniques that you use to help people discharge some of this?
Yeah, they're definitely releasing the distortions and the sort of characters we create for survival and embodiments. Like as we're growing up, as we're experiencing life, we create energy to shield ourselves. We also have parts of us that never got love, never got thanks, never got those. So it's kind of like caught in the system. It's waiting for that specific frequency. So what I do as a regular habit, and what people can do right away, most people have a meditation routine. Most people I work with, they'll tell me some type of meditation routine, but they don't have speaking to their body. That's the second part. I want to meditate, bring that breath up, and now I want to start speaking to any family generational trauma or karma. Thank you for what you've taught me. I no longer identify with you. I am the energy of love, fully embodied. Now, I want to make this as close to non-negotiable as I can. I want to close that gap of doubt, because that means that signal traveled through my whole system. If I have doubt, the signal's not completing. But what I want to get at is I want to get a genuine thank you, a genuine I love you, because that's exactly what these parts of us need to release. They need that recognition, and we can give that to the inner child, to the wounded parts of ourselves, and witness as we're speaking to our body spasms, feel things move, because those pockets of energy are starting to release. It's like playing with magnets, and you flip one over and it pushes the other. You're just now learning how to play with frequencies. So something else that's very helpful is I'll think of things that I am thankful for, or an experience that I had, not related to a person, just an experience, and I'll breathe. Now I'm reconnecting and cycling that energy through my system. Now I can use that thankfulness and that peace and that love from this memory to help myself heal. Now I start giving thanks. So I'm looking to create a specific charge, whether it's thank you, gratitude, love, then send that charge through my system.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I recommend to some of the clients that I work with is just this hourly centering, where I've got a little chime app, it beeps every hour, and we just take a minute, and I've got a visualization of gratitude.
Hmm.
I think maybe a similar concept. So we're in the matrix, we're working, beep, beep, goes off, stop, catch
Yeah.
yourself, find yourself, right? Change your frequency, settle into that frequency. I always say God loves gratitude, right? God loves gratitude, God loves gratitude, whatever it may be. And you will completely change the way that you are present in that moment. And then you can shift into that next hour.
As well as correcting your inputs and your outputs, because I don't want to allow the lower inner speak, lower opinions of others to go down into my body, because that's the crazy thing about the body. Whatever I believe is going to become me. So now I have a free will to choose. It's just some of us are more likely to choose unworthy versus worthy based on past programming. So I want a mechanism at the door for lower thoughts, lower energies to say, thank you for what you're teaching me, but you're not welcome here. Go into the heart space before it travels through my body and teaches me another way, because it will gladly do that if I don't tell the signal to go through my heart for discernment. So I'm redirecting the current, the wiring. In between this, by not attaching belief to these thoughts, by not projecting anger and frustration out onto people, I'm gathering a charge, gathering something in between these inputs and these outputs. That's why it's important I don't identify with every piece of conversation in my mind, that I do that programming to know what I am, because then I'm not going to identify with a lot.
Yeah, and again, I think the gift that you have, along with several of them, again, is like you said, that discernment between the two different voices, essentially, right? I can tell. I'm like, no, not
I,
you.
I,
Oh,
and
you.
I even want my physical pain to go through my heart first before you speak to my body. And I am that stubborn. I'm that strong-willed because I had enough of that pain in my body and I've learned how to speak to it and move it. So you can do that with physical pain too, just a matter of your will and your authority, and to realize I do have authority as the body of the Christ. So if I'm the body of the Christ, what's the second part? That's filling me with the Christ, filling me with that love and that energy that heals me.
I love that analogy to Trinity, and we're going to step back on that. I have a couple questions for you, but one was just a personal one, because again, the massive difference between our experiences is I've had no interaction with beings, right? It was, my experience was I was everything. I was one with God. Some people said their experience was like I was God, and I'm like, yes, but I felt more like the hand on God, or the finger on the hand of God. Like I'm a part of that, but but I didn't have these beings. So I've always been curious about that. What would you think these beings are? What do you think that they are?
Well, I've come to learn that they were Elohim, basically what we would refer to as angels, but they're high density beings that we might also refer to as interdimensional aliens, that they were one and the same. Um, some of them identified as Arcturians, and then later I started to have others come through in like healing sessions. I'd be given a healing session. All of a sudden, I'd see a different being, one that looks like a praying mantis. And I'm like, oh, what's going on here? And I've come to trust where if I'm doing a healing and my vision starts, um, but different races that were all part of this galactic federation, because when they showed up in my room, I could feel them and hear them, but I couldn't see them just yet. And I think probably because I would have freaked out because I was pretty early on. Um, but they said we're from the Galactic Federation. We're here to help with the ascension and the evolution of humanity. And you're part of the Divine Council of Nine. And I'm like, yeah, whatever, dude. Get lost. I was eating a bowl of Cheerios, right? So I look up some of the information it gave me. I'm like, okay, this is real. This is real. Well, as real as I could find. I'm confirming some information because I was still a skeptic. I figured because of what I experienced young and then the darkness of childhood trauma, that if there was a God, he didn't like me. That was the point I was at when this was happening. I was in a dark place. So I'm looking up the information. I'm like, yeah, this is real stuff. Next time they returned, I just happened to be eating a bowl of Cheerios. So I have no idea what was with the Cheerios. But then I listened more about the inputs, the outputs, about correcting certain placements of my energies, returning into the present moment, as well as becoming a singular aspect of myself, so that I'm no longer in the past or in the future, that I'm all three at one.
Mhm.
And then they spoke a little bit more about the Trinity being a circuit, and then I needed to start connecting to the circuit and kind of giving me time to get going. Stuff.
In your opinion, based on all these experiences, and this is
Like
again
it
something
froze
I've
up
been,
for a second there.
oh,
But
sorry. Yeah. Out of
they were
all your experiences,
they talked a lot about singularity, and I realized in that journey that I had made a quantum leap. That a lot of the information that I was getting was from my future self, and that I was guiding my past self in the present moment.
interesting. So based on all these experiences, what do you think happens when we die? What's your opinion?
I believe we go to a place that's much more real and vibrant and expansive than our own, because we were shrunk to come down into this density in a way. And that's why we feel there's more to this life. There's more. Yeah, because we want to expand back to that remembering of what we are. We're all just trying to remember our way home to reconnect to that energy. But I believe there's still levels and teaching and learning to do on the other side. And it's much harder to learn how to become love over there than it is with this body and this density. With these experiences and situations, they give us a unique vehicle to do that with, to have that travel from density to light, density to light, density to light, until we close the gap and they become one. But we go to beautiful places. Depending on the embodiment and the energy we have, that's going to tell us where we need to go.
You talked earlier about biophotons and collective consciousness. Can you share that and how you use that in your healing practices?
Sure. So we all emit a frequency or light in the form of biophotons, and these contain information. And they taught me how to basically program this energy and then use it for quantum entanglement, to help people heal over vast distances. Now, what I've learned is that this is all by their intention, their invite. In other words, they're saying, yes, I want to connect to this circuit with you. And now they're circuiting with me. And I'm able to get their vibration frequency through quantum entanglement with these photons that can travel over vast distances, without any loss in time or space. I'm able to get their photons vibrating very high. And this is kind of like throwing bounce in the dryer when you don't want the clothes to stick together. This is what starts releasing that heavy, sticky energy that blocks up the neural pathways. It's almost like they're rewired into a different circuit for survival. Like most of us have rewired ourselves for survival, and now they're coming back into their presence.
It's all in alignment to me. I mean, again, just what I'm seeing in the world is kind of what we tapped on earlier. People playing out their programming, completely convinced that they are this programming. And if you can't see past that, then obviously you're going to live in a material world and you're going to just function in that type of environment. What do you recommend to people that maybe are stuck in that? Or maybe they're on the fence or considering like this, there's got to be more to this. I know there's more to this. I don't want to go see Kirby and necessarily do psychedelics, right? How else can I tap into this aspect of me?
Well, I would hope that they have some sense of creator. I know for me, through my NDE and from what I was taught after, that I was shown this as a heavenly father, a divine mother, and that they make a son. Now, something you can do right away is I ask pure spirit to enter my consciousness and connect to my heart. And I ask my creator to surround me, and then start giving thanks to some of their past, as well as in that process, start speaking daily to your body as if something has already occurred. And that's an action that I take a lot. Like I'll do hot salt baths where I'm sweating and I'm doing programming. I don't recommend too hot for anybody. And I'm speaking basically to my body that something has already occurred, because I realize my body doesn't have a separate brain. It's going to accept what I believe to be true. And now that's going to move me into a different timeline. Yes. Because everything we want to accomplish, it's already done. It's just a matter of your trajectory to get to that timeline, the embodiment. So we have so many timelines available to us, but where we fall, it's like Plinko. where we fall in that slot of that timeline is going to depend on the love we embody, the other type of judgment or charges. So start speaking to the body as if something's already accomplished and try to close the gap of doubt, because you want to signal to the body to basically come online with your thought. Because a lot of people I work with, their healing has already happened. They're just now having their mind and body catch up in the 3D reality. And they're connecting to that spirit to embody it and make it physical. So speaking as if things have already occurred.
Yeah, that's crucial. And I think to your point, folks understanding, like if I sat here and I had us relax and anybody listening, we went to a visualization of peeling a lemon, smelling the lemon, biting into the lemon,
Yeah.
right? I can make your mouth salivate. There's no lemon there. Your body doesn't know the difference between what it's imagined and the reality. So the point is we are creating our reality right now.
And this is proved by PTSD. So let's use this in reverse. If I can be programmed with these bad illusions, then I could program myself to align with a higher form of reality, because it's happening through me. As well as, listeners, you always want to be aware when your nervous system is starting to contract and you're starting to focus on small things. That's when you want to send that thought down into your system that I am all of creation, that I am a sovereign being, because you're signaling to the system to expand again. And now you're learning there's a game here. There's certain energies that are causing me to shrink. There's other energies that are causing me to expand. And now you're starting to learn how the diet, basically the diet for the spirit. What kind of food do I want to feed it in the form of thoughts and frequencies and feelings?
Perfect. Yes, because that is the average person right now. Again, having the same thoughts that they had yesterday are usually negative thoughts. So I could already tell you how you're going to go throughout your day, right? It's predictable because it's the same thought patterns. So how do we disrupt these thought patterns and start being aware of some of these negative and how they're impacting our bodies?
As soon as you're having them, that's when you want to say thank you for what you're teaching me, because now you're hitting it with an opposite charge. This is negative. I'm going to hit it with a beautiful thank you for what you're teaching me, because now this is now stopping its cycle as well from passing through your body. You don't want that junk in your body. This is not going to teach me anything down in my foot, or it's going to take me 2 years to do so. So teach me through my heart. So I direct these lower descending signals through the heart. And after a while, I rewired the brain and the heart to do it automatically. You teach it, you train it.
Yeah. Again, I think it's like the word manifestation is also overplayed and overused, but I think that's essentially what it is. Like you said, you're already creating your future by feeling it, by actually creating it and feeling it. And again, my guess is what you're saying on that is there's a quantum field there. So it's like you've created that. There's multiple paths to different spots, but you're creating that is going to make that more realistic. And to your piece earlier of like heaven or this other, whatever we want to call it, God, source consciousness, the vibration that it's on, my experience was almost like a magnet, right? Like a magnet's going to attract a certain, other field, but if it's that negative field, it would be repulsed by it. So my experience of God, consciousness, heaven was like there was no space for anything but unconditional love here.
Same here. I mean, God, creator to me, God became that feeling. Yes. And I wanted to chase that feeling that I felt and built on it. And I learned what discharged me, what grounded me out, and what grew this charge. And that was really the goal, was to grow that charge and then just show other people how to do it,
Yeah, and let's get into that. We talked just briefly before we started recording about Reiki, and again, with all respect towards Reiki, I've got nothing but the respect for it and appreciation for how it was set up. And that was one of my first experiences with energy work, but it was just really a foundation for it of understanding how it's operating. But then it seemed to kind of evolve into something more than that. Like a lot of things that humans create, right? It's got its own little fence.
For me, it was like the first beginnings of feeling energy, working with energy. But the more I purified, the more I was able to embody, the more I expanded my bandwidth. The more we let go of that shadow self, the more data we can carry. and we start to learn other things, you know. And I eventually learned that it was 0 point that I was after, 0 point healing. I want the ability to fully ground myself, maximally ground myself into that state, because now there's nothing else that's going to ground me out, that's going to take the charge away.
Yeah, and I think from somebody that's doing any type of energy work or healing, I've canceled appointments before because I just didn't feel, for whatever reasons, I could get myself into that space. And I just, for me personally, it's an embodied feel. When I'm in that space with the client, it's an embodied feel. We kind of talked about, I've got a visualization of an embodiment. I'm trying to that's my way of connecting with God, this vision of it, and then trying to take on the characteristics of that, just kind of subconsciously, I'm able to feel my energy shift. And I think that's important because, and you can tell me if it's different, I do believe in resonant frequency. I feel that my frequency, especially if I'm going to put my hand on somebody, even though it does travel, so I don't necessarily have to put my hands on, but if I'm going to be in this space and put my hands on somebody, they're going to pick up that resonant frequency. And through the way that I'm managing my frequency, their frequency is going to shift to align with that.
Yeah,
Now,
there's a
that's
certain
just a visualization, but maybe different
Yeah.
for you. What do you feel is happening?
Yeah, there's a certain responsibility to your work, but I have noticed if you're feeling down, boom, that's going to move right out of the way, and the energy is going to come through and do what it does because they made an agreement with their creator.
Gotcha.
So if I'm just feeling physically down or whatever, that's fine. If I'm ignoring my work, yeah, that's definitely going to affect it.
Yeah. Yeah, but that was it. As I mentioned earlier, I went through that stage of just not feeling this.
Yeah.
And
I wasn't sure I'd be doing this. You know what I mean? There were times I wanted to give up years ago because it had cost me a lot. But I realized letting go of that made room for a love that would never go away, would never leave me. It was always there. And, you know, so.
yeah, and I felt people used to ask me like, "Oh, you do all this work, don't you feel like you're taking on all these other people's energies?" And I just never felt that. I always just felt that it just kind of ran through me, almost like grounding out through me into the earth. I never felt like, "Oh, that was super heavy for me to help them shift through."
Yeah.
If that makes any
No.
sense.
Yeah, not unless you're not doing your work, you know, to
Mhm.
cleanse your own emotions. Because if you're not cleansing your own emotions, as that's coming through, it's going to link up with it, and it's going to go, well, I'm going to stay here rather than go to where I should.
Makes sense. Well, I want to honor your time. I've got so many more questions, but again, I want to honor your time, and I want to give you an opportunity. Again, the objective of my podcast is it has zero to do with me. I want to highlight people in the community that I think are making an impact, help them meet new people, kind of expand what they're trying to do because it's important work. And how else do people know about you, right? I randomly found your podcast. I thought it was important, and I think these conversations are important. And the work you're doing is important and impactful. So somebody that's potentially interested, who's a good potential candidate for you to work with, and what does that look like?
I would say I work with anybody. I've worked with the elderly, literally many in senior homes. Their children have arranged sessions, and children with autism, people with sports injuries, you name it. Wiring yourself into that direct current is really what fixes a lot of our problems because we're returning back to that original state. And the healing really is by the people doing the work, not even really by me. I'm just showing them how. I'm helping facilitate that.
Sure.
But yeah, wide range of physical to emotional to even gotten into the entities, things like that, which they're not fun. They're a little sticky, but you know how that is.
What would a session look like? So if I'm somebody that's like I'm stuck in whatever emotional trap that I've created for myself,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm looking for a key out. What would a session look like with you?
Well, we would speak for a bit. We would arrange it obviously through the calendar. We would speak for a little bit in the beginning. Then I would guide people through some practices on connecting with the Trinity, claiming their identity as the divine blueprint. In other words, I want to subscribe to the fact that I am the image of creator I was made in, because that's going to give me an expanded template. It's not going to give me some small version of myself, which is also why I want to unsubscribe to the need for opinions or validations. and identity is given to me by the world. I'm more than just a father, a son, a brother. I'm all of creation experiencing these things. So we would guide through some of that reconnecting, because it's literally hitting buttons and switches and levers to try to move this current back into the center. We would claim our 0 point energy through the Christ. That refined energy of this positive and negative coming together is what we're after, to embody that. Then we would claim, basically call all of our multidimensional aspects of self into the moment of now through the Christ, tied together in a nice ribbon. So I'm looking to condense my energy, in other words, because I'm trying to build a charge here that pushes out these lower charges, makes them come together. So I'm giving order to the system, generating polarity. So we would invite in the Trinity, claim our identity, claim our 0 point energy, call multidimensional energy into the moment of now. And then we would say, give thanks to ourself, give thanks to others, forgiveness. And then we would start speaking, basically, any lower energies, frequencies, or densities, you are bound to the Christ as one. So what I want to do is start signaling to these energies, I'm claiming this space. It's already mine. I just am realizing it now, you know?
I love that.
So then I would have them lay down for a bit, where I'd be working on their system. A lot of times people will yawn. They'll feel tingles, warm and cold spots, things like that.
It's such an important piece. Again, as we've had this conversation, and it's been fascinating, just that I hope folks that are listening just understand, if they don't understand already, that again, this is a self-created trap. I heard somebody say once, you have a kid and he's hopping on the coffee table and you're like, get off the coffee table. Well, a kid doesn't know what coffee or a table is, right? But then they just put one brick in this little prison. How many coffee tables have they been told to get off of by the time they're 20 years old, right? And that's kind of created this prison of who they think they are and how they think they're supposed to show up in the world. And I think we're seeing that in its ugliness on social media and these other platforms where it's like, this is it. It's like, no, this isn't it. That's potentially your reality, but most folks can't see out their own reality. And I think anything creating this massive amount of separateness, because our conversation seems like we are all one of one aspect, and that is love. And if you can see that, that's going to impact how you show up in the world. And for me,
absolutely,
experience was being in the car and hearing a song and then crying, like tears of joy. Like I used to make fun of that. I'm like, nobody cries at weddings. That's ridiculous. And then I'm like, oh, I'm crying out of gratitude for this energetic experience of feeling and of having this understanding that I am more than that character I've been playing my whole life. And if folks can tap into that, it will change everything. And it's a trickle down. It changes you. It could change your partners. It could change changes your community. And I think that's all we can do with everything going on in the world. Fix yourself, fix your family, fix your community, fix your neighborhood. Then we can worry about the world.
Through that simple programming, through that simple programming, I'm now no longer being fed off by these programs of the world that want to separate me from love, which is my identity. So that's why you want to be aware and do your own programming, because as soon as you go out there, like as you mentioned, you're going to be pushed and pulled, and I've gone through those hills and valleys. The difference is I figured out that I was the hill, I was the valley,
And it gives you, and again, the beauty of having an experience, and I'm just so grateful for the experiences I've had, is, like you said, it eliminates this concept of belief. I don't have belief. It's a fact to me. And we kind of talked about earlier, I didn't feel like I was losing my mind when I was having these experiences. It just seemed that is just it. That is just truth. And maybe other people aren't seeing this truth, but that is the truth. And
it helps reveal a lot too. Yeah. And it helps reveal, who authentically feels love for you and who doesn't. As you embrace this authenticity, I got to the point where I was like, I don't care anymore. This is my story. I'm going to live it. And the authentic resonate with that. So
I'm aboard or down. I'm with you. I'll give you the floor in closing. I'd love to have you on another time. There's so much great stuff here that again just resonates and it makes sense. And I know the folks that are listening in our community anyway, energy work and this type of concept is really appreciated. So I think you'll get some communication from some folks. But what would you like to close with? Anything you want to share in closing?
I would just say start taking authority and speaking to your system, because you already were loved before you came here. You already were accepted. You already were forgiven. You were already validated. You were supposed to be human. So giving those reminders to that nervous system is what's going to cause it to basically rewire itself back to that divine center where you know everything's okay, everything's safe. And understand that, hey, now I can overcome density, I can overcome heavy feelings. But really getting into that practice of identifying yourself as something larger than yourself, then that's going to help you have that ability to control the shifting and the movement in your system. That's really what you're looking to do, and connect to that love you already were. So start signaling to that to the body.
Well, that's perfect. And again, I honestly, I really do appreciate you taking the time. I will put your, like per usual, put your contact information. I encourage people to reach out, right? I know a lot of folks are maybe had some experience with some energy or some different healers, but to me, just again, I'm pretty, I don't trust a lot of people. Let's just say that I hear a lot of stories from a lot of folks, and I'm usually skeptical of a lot of what I heard, but there's something about your story and the way it resonated with me, and just the way that you carry yourself just feels right. So
Yeah,
I
I
really do
appreciate
encourage
that.
folks.
I get healers. I actually get doctors and psychologists too that come and they're very interested, because they're not hearing this in the mainstream, you know, that hey, I have this ability to control how I feel when I want to feel it instead of the world. And that's really what it's about, giving you back your free will.
And it's such an important gift, and it's such an important tool, because again, you know, a lot of the folks that I work with are therapists as well. My wife's a therapist, you know, and you and I have been involved with therapists. It's beautiful for what they're trying to do, but there's some limitations to it, right?
Yeah.
So you know, I always tell folks, if you've been working with a therapist for a couple of years now and you feel like you're just running on a treadmill, consider alternatives. There are alternatives that work. And I
Hmm.
haven't facilitated an experience to a therapist yet who didn't come back and say, why aren't we doing that for everyone? Not
Yep.
necessarily the psychedelic aspect of it, but this aspect of them discovering their authentic self. And again, I believe in titration. I don't think psychedelics are for everyone. And that's why I don't encourage anybody to necessarily do them unless it feels right for them. I'm always looking for other tools, other ways for them to have that same experience I've had
Yeah.
and how it's healed me without the psychedelic. So it's
It's all about that.
fascinating.
It's all about expansion, like one way or the other. But once you expand, then you want some tools, right? You want to have a bat belt, you know?
That's it. And we talk a lot about that in our course. Like folks have these experiences, and this is, and I'll close with this because I think this is another tool that you could bring to the community in general, is this integration practice, right? Like
Mm.
we call psychedelic integration. People have these experiences, especially an experience like I had. I had nobody to guide me afterwards. I'm like, I think I'm one with everything, but I don't even know what to do with that.
Yeah, where do I plan it? Yeah.
Yeah, so and nobody had any answers, like good luck. So I had to continue to do my work and try to figure all this out the long way. But having somebody that's already had this experience that could help you interpret some of this information is extremely valuable. So if somebody's listening and feels that fits them, please reach out. And again, I'll have all your contact information there, and really encourage people to look you up. All right,
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on.
love it. Well, I appreciate you taking the time. All right.